And as I've done in the past, I'm just going to give you a quick overview of where things stand at the federal level on coronavirus, the phase 4 coronavirus package. Um, Unfortunately, if you've been watching the news, I don't really have that much to update you on. The White House, the House Democrats, and Senate Republicans all remain pretty far apart on most issues. Last week, House Democrats, they backed off of their HEROES Act, which is a $3.5 trillion package. They put on the floor a $2.5 trillion package that passed largely on party line vote. The Senate Republicans, for their part, several weeks ago, they put a $500 billion package on the floor that failed to pass, again, on a largely party line vote. As I said, the parties are pretty far apart on most issues. There is no agreement on how much or how to provide additional aid to state and local governments. There's no agreement on how to provide additional aid for unemployment insurance. There isn't any agreement on providing liability protections, and there isn't really much agreement on how to provide additional assistance to schools and daycare centers. The one area where there is some agreement, and there is actually quite a bit of agreement, is on providing additional aid and expanding and extending the Paycheck Protection Program. Both the House and the Senate pieces of legislation that have been put on the floor have included an extension of the Paycheck Protection Program. They will allow for a second round of loans to businesses that have exhausted their Paycheck Protection Program loan, and they provide for an expedited forgiveness process for loans of $150,000 or less. And then also of interest to those of us in the chamber industry, both bills to some extent will allow local chambers of commerce to access the Paycheck Protection Program. The House bill has the preferable language. It opens up the Paycheck Protection Program to all nonprofits, whereas the Senate bill only targets that as additional assistance to 501c6s. And it also puts a lot of restrictions on the types of chambers that can access that money if they lobby state and federal government. Where this goes from here is anyone's guess. The House has adjourned until after the elections, though they can come back pretty quickly if a deal is reached. The Senate is in DC, but they are on a 2-week hiatus from floor activity because of the outbreak of coronavirus in the Senate. We are continuing to push on our priorities. Again, our priorities are extending and expanding the PPP, liability protections for businesses, state and local aid, and some form of expanded benefit from the federal government for unemployment insurance, and then aid to schools and daycare centers so they can open up safely when they're given the okay to open up. Meanwhile, while all this is going on, our economists back in DC have been watching the economy very closely. We've put out a lot of blog posts and writing on this. We are not seeing the V-shaped recovery that people had hoped for. In other words, we're not seeing, after a sharp decline, a sharp tick back up. What we're really seeing is a K-shaped recovery. Some industries are doing quite well. They've recovered quite a bit. But a lot of industries, specifically industries in the hospitality sector, the travel sector, any kind of business that really requires direct interaction with customers, those businesses are continuing to struggle a great deal. And based on information, or based on what our economists have observed, what we're likely to see if action doesn't come out of DC in the next month, we're likely to start to see 75,000 airline employees get furloughed. The restaurant industry is looking at losing up to $240 billion by the end of the year. School closures are going to result in a loss of $700 billion in revenue and productivity, because up to 13% of working parents are going to have to take time away from work to care for their children and to help them with their remote school learning. 4 million small businesses are likely going to lose, they're likely going to run out of Paycheck Protection Program loans in the very near future, and up to 27 million individuals at risk. It is necessary that Congress take action sooner rather than later. But given the way things are going in DC right now, it likely is not going to happen until after the election. Of course, we welcome any action before then, but just given the way things are going right now, it doesn't look like we are going to see any kind of significant action on a phase 4 bill until after the election. There is just a little bit of good news. Congress was able to avoid a budget standoff this year, or at least they were able to delay it until later in the year. When the end of the fiscal year was the end of September, Congress passed a continuing resolution funding the government until December 11th. Included in that continuing resolution was a 1-year extension of the FAST Act, that's the Surface Transportation Bill, so that avoids any kind of disruption in funding to states and local governments for highway and road construction funding. It also will give Congress enough time when they reconvene in January, after the new Congress is sworn in, to give them some time to come up with a more robust and significant investment in infrastructure and transportation. Beyond that, I also just want to thank this group. When I was on last, I was discussing an online tool the U.S. Chamber had created to demonstrate all the various proposals out there for unemployment insurance. One of you was kind enough to point out that the numbers didn't look right. After that meeting, I went and spent several hours running through all the numbers that our people back in DC had put on our website, and sure enough, they didn't add up. And it turns out that you all found a very significant mathematical error on our website. So thank you for pointing that out. It should be corrected now, even though that online tool is actually moot because we've moved beyond those proposals. But thank you for pressing me on that. It led me to point some errors out to my colleagues in DC. So happy to take any questions. All right. I will just continue to stay in touch with Tara and send you all information through her as things develop in DC. Hopefully we will see some progress in the near future, but like I said, just the way things look, the political environment in DC, it's likely we're not going to see significant action until after the election. So thank you, and I look forward to seeing you on a future meeting.
Great. Are there still some regular programming that we can tune into virtually? The kinds of things?
Yeah, they're continuing to do the Path Forward webinars. They're not doing them as frequently. I think there's a concern just that people are they're zoomed out, and also that coming up with content week after week, as you well know, yes, can be a challenge. So, but we are continuing to put stuff out. The U.S. Chamber Foundation in particular is continuing to do a number of online series.
Great. Well, as always, thank you so much for being here. I'm trying to remember who our mathematician in the group was. I know we've got a math professor there. I'm wondering if it was her. I do remember the discussion. So again, I'm glad that this group was the one to preempt that. So thank you. Very proud. All right. Thanks again, Chris. I know you need to jump off whenever you need to. That's perfectly fine. So we're going to move to the city of Puyallup. I'm excited to announce that we've got the new Jeff Wilson, the city of Puyallup's new Director of Permitting and Development Services, on the line as well. So we'll hear both from Meredith Neal, an Economic Development Manager, along with Jeff today. Good morning, Jeff. I'd like to introduce myself. Nice to see you. Great. Well, we'll go ahead and kick it off with Meredith first, if you like, Meredith. I know sometimes you might have your own agenda.
Yeah, so I'll give a couple of quick updates. The first big one is that the second round of Emergency Small Business Grants just opened up. A couple of weeks ago, the Puyallup City Council approved a second round of grants. So that's another $150,000 that's going directly towards businesses. Businesses who received the grant before are welcome and encouraged to apply for a second round. So they would be able to get an aggregate of $4,000 because we had $2,000 in the first round, and this will be another $2,000. That opened a couple of days ago and it closes on October 16th. And the same criteria apply. Any business that has 20 employees or less, has a physical location in the city of Puyallup, and has been in business since March 1st of 2020. Those are kind of the big ones. There are a few other smaller criteria there. We tried to make it pretty simple and easy. Businesses that had previously been approved, they have a form that literally has their business name and their contact information, and they click submit and they don't have to put any other paperwork in. So this is really about reaching the ongoing need of our businesses in their funding so that they can keep themselves open and operational. The next big thing is that we yesterday put out an RFP for a tourism recovery destination marketing campaign. So that's something that we had been talking about in looking at our city and most of the cities in Pierce County. We have a lot of tourism and a lot of visitors who come to our cities. And with the loss for us in Puyallup of the state fair this fall and a number of other types of events that normally draw a lot of people, we're definitely seeing that. Looking at our sales tax numbers, we just got them for July. In our hospitality, so our accommodations, hotels, and food and restaurant purveyors, we're still down over 20% year over year, both in June and July in that sector. The other one that we're still seeing losses like that is our construction industry, which is down about 20% as well. Most of our other sectors have bounced back and are somewhat in line with where they've been in 2019. So this is really meant to address that. That is open through the 16th. It's going to be a pretty rapid response because we're going to be using CARES funding for it. So most of the plan work will be complete by November 30th. So it's going to be kind of a fun, bumpy ride to get there. And certainly our partners at the Chamber will be called upon to sort of give some input there, and some of our industry partners as we figure out how best to support them. Beyond that, since I mentioned sales tax, I think it's interesting to note that looking at our July sales tax numbers, that we're only down about 4% as compared to July 2019, which is good news for us overall. It's not as bad as we thought it would be. Down 4% still is pretty impactful in a negative way for our local businesses. But, you know, I think that a lot of the messaging around supporting local and keeping dollars in our community really has resonated. We've seen, particularly in the small retail sector, a bump way back up, where at the beginning of this, our big box stores, our warehouse stores, our superstores were doing fantastically, and our small retail was had 40% losses year over year. But now small retail is back up. They're actually, in July, their sales were 10% higher than July of 2019. So I think that that feeling that we need to support our community and our smaller stores really is coming up. I see Brooke's question. They're part of a report. I'll find the link to where that is, Brooke. So with that, I'll pass it over to Jeff and let him introduce himself, and we're very excited to have him. So
thank you, Meredith. Thank you. It's very nice to meet you. Name's Jeff Wilson, and for me, it's kind of back to the future. I actually started my career as an intern at Puyallup many moons ago. Stayed mostly Western Washington local. I grew up in Lakewood, and I've had both experience in the public sector, probably about 30 plus years, and then about 10 plus years in the private sector, working in an architect's office and doing some project management in Costco's in the West Coast and overseas in Asia. So spent time both sides of the counter and wanted to get back into local service. And I thought I'd come back here where I started my career and take the knowledge I learned on both sides of the counter and do what I can, you know, for the possible things here in Puyallup. It's exciting to be back here and exciting to meet all of you.
Great. Any questions for Jeff? With the new faces at City of Puyallup, I would love an opportunity with Jeff and Joyce to maybe do a member moment where we just interview you a little bit and get to meet you and introduce you to our business community, if that's okay with you.
I'd love to. I'm excited to meet everybody and get involved.
Fantastic. I'm going to bounce a little out of order just with some time constraints that I'm aware of. I'd like to hold on Sumner for a moment and go to the county. I know we have Councilman Morell on the line and hopefully Councilwoman Roach as well, and Betty Capistani. So we'll start with Councilman Morell, who I know is on the line. Good morning.
Dave, I think you're on mute.
I can unmute him if I see his number. I'm not sure which is his though. All right. Councilwoman Roach, are you on the line? I know you had confirmed through your assistant, but I'm not sure that I see your number. All right, Betty. The floor is yours.
Well, good morning. It's wonderful to see everyone, and I'm sure if our council members hop on the line and unmute themselves, they can interrupt me at any time. So we have a lot of things happening at the county, as you're aware of. Is Dave on? So we have a lot of programs going on. Our rent and mortgage assistance has been our popular program. And currently over 915 companies have applied for that program, 700 of them in the last 2 weeks. So it's a big program. Council today is considering adding more dollars to both our rent and mortgage assistance program for commercial and also rent and mortgage assistance for people from our human services side. They also are looking at a program that's pretty innovative along the hospitality industry line. And we've been working with our restaurants and the Hospitality Association to put together a program that helps our fine dining restaurants. So the code that you go in to sit down and eat, and working with them to do a program in November, Pierce County Dines Out, that Sundays through Thursdays, they would give a 30% discount for any Pierce County resident off of their tab, except for alcohol. And it's a way, both for our residents to kind of get back into restaurants with making sure we're still in all the health and safety compliance pieces. Knowing that they're at 50% of what they can serve, but many of them are not getting the seats during that time period. So we'll know a little more this afternoon, but we've been working with 6 different operators in Pierce County that have multiple locations, mostly locally owned, and they're pretty excited about the program because, as Meredith mentioned, our whole hospitality industry is the most impacted. This is also the industry that employs a lot of people that may be single family people, or they may be people with their first jobs. So them not having jobs, they're the hardest hit in the economy. And so we're trying to just make sure whatever we can to help the health of everybody in our community with jobs if possible.
Great, thank you. Any questions for Betty? I know the Economic Development Board as well had their Vitality Grant, which a lot of our community benefited from as well. So I think Pierce County is batting 1,000 and has just done so much for our community. So we're very happy with the leadership in place there, making the decisions they're making in council. So thank you, Betty. And I am looking really quick. I know which one is Dave now, so I'm going to see if I can get him to unmute from his phone. All right. Not sure that it's unmuting him. Dave, I'm not sure what that is going on. I apologize, Councilman Morell. Again, jump in anytime if you'd like. But I think for now, we will go ahead and move back to the city of Sumner. We have Ryan Windish on the line. Happy to hear from you.
Thank you, Tara. Sometimes I have trouble finding my unmute button. Things are happening in Sumner. We got a lot going on, as usual. One thing I did want to highlight is that the Sumner Downtown Promotions Association they're changing their name. They've changed it to the Sumner Main Street Association, and they've hired a familiar person with Puyallup, Jill Starks, as their executive director. So if this isn't news, I apologize. I missed your last meeting, but they are planning on applying for Main Street status as well. They've been kind of going through that process for a couple of years, and it's just what I can tell you is they have some younger blood, I guess, lack of a better way to put that, stepping in leadership positions. And with Jill Starks as their executive director, I think we are really optimistic and looking forward to working with them as a partnership between the city and them over the next however long, of course. So exciting things happening there. Also wanted to mention that the council approved LTAC funding for 3 different projects. One is actually to put the white silhouette lights that outline the buildings downtown Sumner to keep things cheerful and lively, definitely during the darker months of the year, and just kind of give a crisp look to the evening. And the other, that was $30,000 project, and then they also committed $30,000 to a Main Street visioning effort, which we're kicking off today with the University of Washington Tacoma Urban Design Studio class. And this is going to be a full year project. The initial part of it is really establishing kind of existing conditions, getting feedback from an advisory committee that includes, of course, downtown businesses and residents as to kind of what do we want our Main Street to look like in the future. And I know Puyallup several years ago went through this similar exercise. You know, how do we want to, you know, have pedestrian amenities in the downtown, outdoor seating, how do the crosswalks look and function? Just a lot of details that will kind of decide the future of that living room of Sumner, if you will, in downtown. So that's a project I'm helping out with, and that's kicking off today. And then also there's $10,000 committed to updating our Come On In Sumner video that's on our website. Carmen Palmer, our communications director, put that video together a couple of years ago, and like she has said, things change. We've got different bridges, we've got different things that have changed, and so it's important to make sure that our image to the world that looks at that video is keeping up with that. So we're doing that as well. Those are kind of we are also reinitiating our Open in Sumner meetings. We had taken those kind of offline for the month of August, and we're getting back into that, being connected with our local businesses. The parklets that have been incredibly popular are still on the street as long as the weather's good. As we all know, the rain is coming, so that we'll be talking about pulling those off the street here eventually. But so that's kind of what we have going on. Oh, a couple other things that I almost forgot to mention. Following in the footsteps of Puyallup, we are also doing a parking survey that's due this Friday, I think it is, the 9th. So we're trying to gather information about the use of parking in the downtown, see if we want to make any changes to that. And we also did an events survey to try to understand which events are popular, which ones people love to go to, in order to partner with the Sumner Main Street Association on, they actually managed the Rhubarb Days event, which, by the way, was incredibly popular in the survey. And no surprise, parades are also very popular. I was a little disappointed to see that fun runs, things like that, weren't so popular, such as it is, but definitely food, parades, community events, people are all about that. So we are going to continue to roll those out as COVID lets up, let's hope, for next year. So happy to answer any questions if I missed anything big that, or of course, Councilmember Newman's on the line, and so is Lana. So if anything, if I missed anything, please speak up.
Thanks, Ryan. I'll have to also give a little kudos to Lana, who on the spot pinch hitted for you last month. She did very well. Lana, did you have anything to add? I know we are going to go to Councilwoman Newman as well. You're great.
Nothing to add. Ryan covered it, so we're good. Thanks.
Awesome. Okay. Councilwoman Newman, anything from City Council?
No, if I can unmute. Ryan always does an extensive job. Just that I think the next couple of months is we're just gonna be it's all gonna be budget issues. We've got to figure out how to balance. I do know when the community weighed in much earlier this year, their top 3 priorities, how we wanted to use funds, was definitely on public safety, managing like streets and traffic, streets, roads, improvements, and also just managing growth, which I sometimes attribute that to also. I think that, well, you can read a couple of things into that, but I think traffic plays into that as well. And we did recently update our own code to get ready for 5G cell towers in town. And so becoming a modern city. But anyway, I think that's about it since Ryan covered so much.
Just on the Sumner fires and outcome, ultimate outcome, what do you know, latest status, latest?
I know that Chief Backer is presenting an update to Rotary this afternoon. I mean, the fires, I think in terms of where it's caused a lot of like social problems and whatnot, has actually been further up the hill. And I know that I've heard him speak. We just kind of need to look out for how we like stabilize the hillside. Since most of what, like, especially to get ready for like heavy rainfall. But otherwise, I mean, I feel terrible about Corliss Resources, their properties being hit hard. But the displaced family, and we have like both the food banks and the school district has really come together to help everyone involved. But in terms of people, like long-term impacts, I feel like it's Bonnie Lake has had a harder hit.
All right. Thanks for that update. And my apologies. I know I needed to, had a couple county council that had a time restraint. So I'm going to circle back to Puyallup. I'm bouncing all over the place because I know we have Councilwoman Jacobson, Councilman Winning on the line, and would love to hear from Councilwoman Newman's counterparts over in City Puyallup. So good morning. Thanks for being here.
Good morning. I'll let Ned tell you about our week-long budget negotiations that we're going to have.
Fun.
We go into our budget session next week, and it'll be a 3-day marathon for us. We're doing our first biennial budget this year. We decided to do that back in the spring. So we're going to depend on good forecasting, and as we're trying to project out, there's so much uncertainty with regard to COVID that it's going to be a little challenging this year, and I like to find out firsthand as much information as I can. I'd appreciate a report from Luke and Paul about how things are looking in their industries right now. Luke, how's the auto industry looking?
How's the auto industry? Was another question?
Yes.
We had a really good summer. It slowed down a little bit in September. But other than that, it was a record summer, but I guess it slowed down a little bit towards the end.
So are you expecting the drop off on the funding that we're seeing out of DC to impact your operation in the coming months?
I think the coming months we're going to have more cars available, which will probably increase sales naturally. And going into the end of the year, there'll be a lot of 2020 models and things that will be selling with really good incentives and such. But I don't see DC having all that much effect on it.
Yeah, that's good. Appreciate the input. And Paul, how's construction development looking?
You asking me? There's still a shortage of residential housing lots and shortage of sites for apartments and lots of activity and on the sites that are available.
Guess that's nothing new. Anyway, appreciate that input, and it'll help me think about our budget process. And I just have to do a shout out for Meredith. She's been doing a great job during COVID. She's really been watching out for our businesses. And beyond that, she's gotten sucked into a lot of things that she really didn't expect in the economic development world, I suspect. So thanks again, Meredith. Anything for you, Cindy?
No, that's good. I figured you'd sum it up. Thanks.
That's it for Puyallup.
Great. Okay, how about we move to our state? Senator Zeiger. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, it's obviously an election year, so a lot of legislators are focused on outside activities. But I'll mention the latest revenue forecast that came in. The earlier revenue forecasts this year really showed a dip in state revenue that was very concerning. The one figure was $8.8 billion less projected than we had budgeted for earlier this year. The latest revenue forecast came back, and we're facing a $4 billion shortfall. So nowhere near as bad as we thought it would be. Still an issue that we're going to need to address, but one that's very manageable. And a number of us have been arguing that the legislature needs to convene this year before we get into the next legislative session so that we can deal with that. There are ways we can do that safely, and we've been talking about that. So there's some questions still about whether we will have a special session following the election sometime in November. So stay tuned on that. My caucus has been trying to get a meeting with Governor Inslee so that we can talk with him directly about some of the things that have been going on in our state. We just want to have that audience with him, and so we're hopefully going to get that opportunity to talk directly with the governor so that we can represent some of the interests of our constituents, because really it's been the executive branch of our state government making the vast majority of decisions during this time. I'll turn it over to I see Kelly is on, as well as Chris.
Thanks.
Okay, I guess I'll go. So I was just going to echo a couple of things that Senator Zeiger mentioned. Is, about $4 billion is the forecast for the shortfall that we have. We also have about $2.5 billion in our rainy day fund. So while it's an issue, it's going to be manageable. We're going to be able to work through this, although it is a forecast. So, and you can see how that it swung so much from the June forecast to the September forecast as conditions have changed. One of the things that this particular forecast did not take into account was Boeing moving production of the 787. So there's there's ongoing activity within the economy that is going to influence future forecasts. But certainly, this is going to be the topic of the next legislative session. But one of the things that I think is positive about this is there's been a lot of calls for additional taxes on families and additional taxes on businesses. And I think these positive revenue forecasts combined with our really solid rainy day fund on hand, it makes those calls for those new taxes much less appealing, even to, I think, those people who were proposing them. Regarding special session, you know, who knows when we're going to have one? I think, quite honestly, everyone is focused on the election right now. The rumors that I'm hearing are just rumors. And you know, they're saying possibly we'll have a special session, but not until after the election. But who knows what's going to happen right now. But that was really just the couple of points that I was going to bring up. So thanks.
Great. Kelly, do you have anything to add?
I'm coming. Okay, there we go. Hi, good morning. The only thing I can add to that is, you know, right now we've been just doing some surveys as to, sorry, my phone's ringing, how that legislative session is going to look when we do go back into session. You know, normally when we're down there, we have public committee hearings that are going on, and the public is invited into those rooms. And, you know, sometimes they can be really crowded with lots of people in there. So what will that legislative process look like come January when the next legislative session starts, and what will the process be for the public to have input on that? Will we even meet in person? And right now they're reviewing the rules and what can be done under the existing law, and if anything needs to change in order to do more distanced or remote or virtual sessions. So we've been participating in some surveys on that and trying to iron out what those details look like for the public. So that's all I got.
I see a question here. Can any of you speak to the conversation about Boeing? What is your take on the governor's response? From Brooke Stegmeyer.
Well, you know, I'm a small business owner myself. So, you know, I've said over and over again, I want Washington to be a place, you know, great place to live, work, raise a family, and start a business. And I don't think it is a good look for our state that a major employer like Boeing would be looking to relocate jobs and production outside of Washington. It's not just that one company, but there's also the suppliers and businesses that benefit from a robust employer like Boeing in Washington. So not great news. At the same time, I think many saw that coming.
I would say we really missed an opportunity here, and I'm not sure that we can go back at this point now that the Boeing company has made a decision. But back in 2013, when the legislature gave a tax exemption or tax incentive to the aerospace industry, that subsequently resulted in some tension with the World Trade Organization that resulted this year in rescinding most of that tax incentive. The missed opportunity came in not applying that tax incentive to all of manufacturing. We could have done that in a way that would have protected Boeing and their relationship with the World Trade Organization, and would have also benefited the manufacturing sector as a whole, and created, I believe, a number of new jobs here in Washington State. So we missed that opportunity. I think going forward, we have to be much more thoughtful about tax policy in a way that we think in terms of incentives. How can we stimulate our economy from small businesses to big businesses in a way that grows our economy? Not just thinking about how do we generate revenue or how do we, I think that's been a lot of the thought process. And we have huge revenue growth. When you look just during the 10 years that I've been in the legislature, when I came in, the state budget was about $31 billion. It is now well over, as of the latest budget we passed, well over $50 billion. So we've seen tremendous budget growth. I think we can step back and think, okay, how do we have a long-term tax structure that actually incentivizes businesses to be created and to stay here in Washington State?
Well said. So any other dialogue here? We've got a great group of minds and a lot going on in our community. A lot of it very positive. It's kind of a blessing to live, you know, and work in this community where I see so much thought leadership here at the table and innovative and collaborative minds working together. I will mention, I have an announcement from the chamber side of things. First of all, Senator Zeiger, Representative Gildon, and Representative Chambers, as great allies to the chamber, we certainly wish you well on your campaign for your incumbent seat with Chambers, and Chris Gildon's making a move for the Senate, and Zeiger and Council. So we certainly hope the best for you. We will be offering for our community a candidate forum that will allow us and, you know, business owners, stakeholders, community alike on Wednesday, October 14th at 3 p.m. We'll have a candidate forum to hear from everyone and get an idea of, you know, what inspired their run and just a little bit of everyone's background. So I will send calendar holds to this group, the GAC, who tends to be most interested, so that if you are able to join us virtually, we hope you can do so. I much prefer these in person, but we'll be offering that as a virtual option for free. So I hope that all of you can tune in for that. I see a question from our board chair, COO at Absher Construction, Kurt Jemistad. How does the positive outlook on state revenues help with the conversation on an effective transportation package?
I believe there will be a very serious conversation over the next couple of years about the next wave of transportation funding at the state level. And that's something where our communities are going to need to be at the table and coming up with the top projects that we want to see represented in that package. And you know, the last couple of years, there have been proposals by Senator Steve Hobbs, who's the chair of the Senate Transportation Committee, as to his vision for a transportation package. He relies primarily on a carbon tax structure. So I haven't been able to support that tax proposal itself, but I've been at the table and offering projects like the Canyon Road completion and infrastructure improvements in East Pierce County to the 410 and 162 corridors. And you know, we want to make sure we get every dollar we can for transportation projects here in Pierce County. So I think that is an important conversation that the chamber and you know, stakeholders throughout Pierce County need to be having right now as we look to the possibility that this could be a very lively discussion in the legislature over the next year or two.
Does anyone believe the 18th Amendment may be at risk in utilizing gas tax funding?
Hans, that's in your bailiwick there, isn't it? That's something that you've been working pretty hard on.
Well, if I understand the question right, if we're talking about a carbon tax, as far as that not being 18th Amendment protected to go to roads.
Hans, this is Kurt. So what I've heard, and the rumor is out there, is that where the 18th Amendment is protecting gas tax and those revenues generated for what are road or transportation package type projects being sucked up into the general fund. We've also heard that, you know, that's more rumor talk than anything, but once the rumors start happening, more discussion takes place about, you know, going after those dollars that are earmarked for certain things versus what is the general fund.
Yeah, I have not heard of talk about rating transportation funds for general budget purposes, but you know, this will be an interesting time we go into right now, because there are just so many demands, additional demands that are going to be on the general fund. Everything from rental assistance to help with you know, rental industry that has been so deeply affected by COVID to just the continuing burden of the unemployment system. You know, and when we have the uncertainty of federal funds, we've been reliant on federal funds for a lot of what's been going on in our state. But when those dry up, then what kind of strains does that place on our state budget? So, yeah, there will definitely be some creativity by budget writers, I think, to kind of do the things that they want to do. We want to avoid, you know, some of the tax increase ideas that have been floated out there to cover those costs in the general fund. The reality is we've got to have a lot of pressure, and those of us who are in the minority, and I'm not going to be in the legislature this next session, but those who continue on in the minority need to be a voice for restraint and saying, you know, that we need to do things within our means, because there will be huge pressures to do things in the general fund to expand the size and scope of government.
Thank you, Senator Zeiger. I just the latest transportation committee meeting that we had really talked about the different segments of transportation and how you know, utilization is down. So we've seen highway traffic come back. They're at about 90% capacity of what pre-COVID was. And you can see that from the toll facilities. But bonding capacity was set at what those high water kind of toll rate toll utilization was, and so they're not being utilized as much as they were expected. So that revenue generation is a little bit down there. Ferries, you know, the state ferries are part of the state highway system, even though we don't have ferries here in the 25th legislative district. We have an obligation as a state to you know, ensure that they are working, and they're at about 30% capacity of what they were pre-COVID. So that's down significantly. And then you look at passenger rail is down about 90%. So some of those things, obviously, highway traffic is bouncing back sooner with things reopening and people getting back to work since the, you know, initial, you know, stay home orders. And there are some of those segments like highway use that we expect to get back to 100% sooner, and then other ones as you go down the line that they're looking 3, 4, 5 years out before they're back to what they were in March of this year.
Thanks.
Yeah.
And then just real quick, I can add a little bit to that, is the 18th Amendment basically says gas tax got to be used for construction, for road construction, right? So there's been a lot of talk in recent years about how that because vehicles are becoming more fuel efficient, therefore they're purchasing less fuel, therefore revenues for transportation projects have been kind of declining. The data is actually the revenue's been about even, but cost of construction has been increasing. So moving forward, there's been a lot of talk about how to make up that gap, right? How do we make up that gap in order to fund construction projects? And one of the things that's on the table, and I'm sure we'll hear a number of other proposals, but one of the main proposals has been that we reduce our reliance on gas tax to fund construction projects by moving some funds from the operating budget to the transportation budget, specifically the state's portion of the sales tax on motor vehicles. There's a clear nexus between the sale of a motor vehicle and construction of roads to transport those motor vehicles. It's an existing tax source. It is not a regressive tax, as many say that the gas tax is regressive. And so there's a lot of merit to that. On the downside, the people on the operating budget, they don't want to give up that money. They want to keep that money within the operating budget rather than give it to the transportation committee. So there's a lot of people fighting over their individual rice bowls, so to speak. Nobody wants to give any of their bit of the plate away. But certainly, I'm sure that we'll hear a number of different proposals as we move through. That just happens to be the leading proposal right now.
Kurt, thank you for opening up this dialogue. I appreciate the insight the three of you provided. Anything else? Thank you all for joining us. Always great to see you. I hope to see you at the candidate forum. Have a great rest of your week.